the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Few things kill a party quicker than running out of, well, anything. When I was in junior high, we called it junior high back then, not middle school. When I was in junior high, I got the bright idea to have a party at my house. Unlike the parties that took place later when I was in high school, I actually told my parents that I wanted to have a party at our house. I even thought it would be a good idea for them to be there. It wasn't my birthday, it was just because it was the end of the school year, because I thought it would be cool to throw a party. But in all honesty, because if I was throwing a party in those few brief weeks leading up to it, people would know who I was. I was the guy throwing a party. My classmates would want to know me so that they would be included on the guest list. And if I was the one throwing the party, I couldn't be left out. There are all kinds of stories and studies these days about this technology that is allowing us to do all kinds of things by ourselves that we used to do with other people. Increasingly, people, and young people in particular, are finding it possible to spend less and less time with anyone else. What that means is that for as much as so many of these new technologies allow us to connect, we find ourselves ironically more isolated than ever before. Which can be convenient when you don't have to answer to anyone else, when you don't have to be accountable to anyone else, when you don't have to take into consideration someone else's feelings. Life is just so much easier. You can truly be master of your destiny and captain of your fate because there's no one around to suggest or require anything else. That's the upside. The downside to all that autonomy, however, is that it can be very, very lonely. So much so that the U.S. Surgeon General's office released a report on the epidemic of loneliness in this country and its adverse health effects and outcomes. Still, sometimes it's easier to be alone and in control than it is to feel left out. And like I said, at the wise old age of 12, my solution to not being left out was to throw a party, and it was great. People came. It was a fun way to kick off our summer vacation, even if the girls didn't want to eat in front of the boys. But it didn't take long for this obnoxious kid that I'd played baseball with but really didn't like to find me and tell me, "You had better do something. This party is going downhill fast." Apparently, we had run out of what? Fun? Music? A reason to be there? What? I didn't know. John tells this seemingly random story about a wedding that Jesus attended. In all the Gospels, it's the only story we have of Jesus doing something so relatable. Jesus went to a wedding. Whose was it? I wonder. What side did he sit on? Was he a friend of the bride or a friend of the groom? Maybe he didn't know either all that well. Maybe it was a family thing that his mom told him he had to go to for some distant cousin in Cana down the road from Nazareth. And so they're all out there doing the electric slide or whatever dance is popular back then when there's a crisis. Now, it's nothing earth-shattering. This isn't the armies of Rome marching through and bringing mayhem and destruction. It isn't wildfires raging through their village. Still, it's a crisis. They've run out of wine. And nothing kills a wedding party in first century Galilee quicker than running out of wine. It's the nightmare of every bridegroom. Because a wedding is more than a good excuse for a week-long party. It's this ceremonial rite that joins together two lives, two families. It's this hopeful event. A bride and a groom stand up and make promises about a future that they cannot even begin to truly imagine. So what does it say about you? What does it say about your marriage, your future, your family, if you run out of wine? Of course, it isn't just bridegrooms who worry about this sort of thing. We all do in one way or another. We all reach the point where we worry about whether there will be enough. There are the obvious worries of people who work hard day in, day out. Will there be enough to pay the rent, to pay the note, to pay the light bill, to buy the groceries? And then it grows and then it becomes, will there be enough to send the kids to college? Maybe buy a car? And then will there be enough to retire? Enough to go visit the kids, or pay for the prescription? But it never seems to stop there. You pay the bills, you get the car, you put away money for retirement. Is it enough? You get the newest gadget, you wear the best names, you fill your house with more and more stuff. Is it enough? But it isn't just stuff. I was talking to a young adult once who was struggling to figure out what she was going to do with her life. And on the one hand, she loved the work that she did, the difference that it made in the lives of the people she worked with. She might never make headlines or the big bucks, but it gave her joy. Still, there were those other voices, you know the ones, the saying that she needed to get married and have a family, settle down, have some security. She didn't know if she wanted all of that. I love what I do, she confessed. But sometimes I wonder, is it enough? I once did a funeral for a man who had been estranged from his only daughter for most of her adult life, ever since she had married a man who was Catholic. He never really forgave her for that. And now she stood in this funeral home making decisions about his casket and the burial plot. She spared no expense. And when it was all decided, she turned to the funeral director with this anxious look on her face. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked. And the truth is, you can make your plans and save your pennies and do your best, and it still won't be enough. You see people stack up piles of cash, multiple homes, cars. They have the perfect life, the perfect job, the perfect family, and they go right out and they wreck it all, chasing whatever it is they think they don't have because it is never enough. You might have heard that it's been said that the Chinese symbol for crisis is actually the combination of two other symbols, one for danger and one for opportunity. Whether it's a wedding feast or your life, the crisis of running out, of not having enough, is both a danger and an opportunity. A friend of mine was telling me about how he would go to this African-American church while he was in seminary and found it a really nice break from his own structured liturgical tradition with its carefully written prayers and defined order of worship. At this church, he observed, it wasn't uncommon for something unexpected to happen in worship, only to have the preacher exclaim, "It ain't in the bulletin." And he began to notice that it was almost always the case that whatever it was that wasn't in the bulletin turned out to be the thing that blessed him the most in those worship services. I suspect that there are more than a few of us who would be a little put off by something that's not in the bulletin. After all, we do everything decently and in order. We like our world ordered and predictable. But you know, that's our order, not God's, or at least not necessarily. God is rarely predictable. It's the things that aren't in the bulletin, the crises in our lives that disrupt what we think we want, that give God the opportunity to bless us in unexpected ways. It's in those moments that we have the opportunity to see in a way we may not have seen before. A while back, there was this series on the radio titled Losing My Religion. It was focused on the increasing number of individuals who, when asked, list no religious tradition or practice for themselves. And one of the stories in the series chronicled people who were raised within a particular tradition, but who now no longer believed. Several of them cited a traumatic crisis that took their faith, caused them to walk away. Each one of them said in some way that they felt they could no longer believe in the God they had been taught to believe in. For some people, losing the image that they have of God, the idea that they've constructed in their minds, feels like the loss of God entirely. It's one thing to run out of wine, but what happens when you run out of faith? Well, it turns out that the thing that feels so dangerous, losing the God you always believed in, is just the opportunity God needs to show us who God truly is. Ultimately, that's what happens in Cana on the third day. What a curious detail John throws in there at the beginning of this story. Could it be that this is about so much more than water and wine? What happens is that there's a celebration that's about to die because they've run out. It's a party that's going downhill fast. There's only one person who can save it. Only one person who can save them from everything they lack. Enough wine, enough stuff, enough importance, enough forgiveness, enough faith, enough love. And what he offers is something miraculous. More wine than they could ever hope to drink. Do you understand what this story is about? Jesus is quite literally the life of the party. The one whose presence in our lives has the ability to transform our every deficit into a surplus beyond measure. He takes what is dead, and on the third day raises it to abundant life. He did it for this wedding. He did it for the world. That means he can do it for you too. In the moment of crisis, where the danger you fear becomes just the opportunity God needs to show you a whole new kind of life. Hallelujah. Amen. Would you stand as together we say what we believe, using